Good morning. We are continuing in our look at this verse, Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. It says, if any of you, then Jesus said to his disciples, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your ways or your selfish desires. Take up the cross and follow me. Okay? Give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. Last couple of weeks, we've looked at this passage, and we've looked at the first two statements where Jesus says to give up your own way and to take up the cross. And today, we come to the last part of this verse, follow me. We've learned that giving up our own way is to say, not my will, but your will be done. It means to give up control to Jesus. We also learned that to take up the cross means that we love Jesus so much that there's nothing in this life that we would not do for him. That we will die for him if that is what we are called to do. That we will give up the luxuries of life. That Jesus is so desirous. He is so desirous to us that we make any sacrifice necessary. Today we will look at the third part, where Jesus says, if you want to be my disciple, follow me. Social media, I don't know, over the last 5 to 10 years, I think social media has grown leaps and bounds. What I mean by that is what didn't exist 5 to 10 years ago or was kind of abstract on the edges, it's like mainstream now. I remember college students talking about Facebook many years ago. Oh, I just look them up on Facebook. And at that time, I was like, what is Facebook? I had no idea what they were talking about. One of my students went to college, and they're like, oh, my roommate emailed me, or she sent me a text message on Facebook because they wanted to know and talk a little bit before they got to college as roommates, because they were perfect strangers. And so from that until now, you look at something like Facebook, you look at YouTube, you look at Snapchat, what else is there? Twitter, Instagram. These are things that are being used right now to share and communicate information. And there are elements of these tools, these apps or whatever, that I find very interesting. And it's this idea of following somebody. Right, on Twitter, you have a button that says to follow. You can click on that. You can follow that person. And what does it mean to follow someone on Twitter? And this is according to Twitter. It says this. Following someone means you've chosen to subscribe to their Twitter updates. When you follow someone, every time they post a new message, it will appear on your Twitter homepage. That's what it means to follow someone. You're subscribing to them. You're basically saying, hey, whatever you say, I want to know. Whatever you share, whatever you tweet, I want to make sure that I don't miss that out or miss out on that. So I want to subscribe or follow you on Twitter. What are some reasons that people follow someone on Twitter? It might be celebrities. It might be organizations or companies that you like their products. You have an interest or commonality with them. You agree with some of the vision, purpose, or whatever. There could be many different reasons why you might choose to follow someone on Twitter. And people talk about, oh, I have so many followers on Twitter. As of June 2016, so last month, Katy Perry has over 90 million followers on Twitter. She is number one. 90 million. 90 million people are following her on Twitter. You know what that means? She could say, oh, I feel so great today because it's a Saturday. 90 million people will read that and say, oh, wow, she's happy today because it's Saturday. The power of that is incredible. 90 million people are following her on Twitter. The irony of this concept of following is not just in Twitter, but I believe you can do that on Instagram as well. I don't do Twitter or Instagram. I think I'm just too old for that stuff. But the idea behind these is the idea of following or subscribing to someone. It's really intriguing to me because maybe it's not so much nowadays, but I remember a particular time in not too long ago where it was like, I don't follow anyone. I'm my own self. I'm going to chart my own path. In a culture that says, you know what, I don't want to follow anyone. I want to be myself. I want to be my own individual. We as a society do an amazing job of following other people. 90 million people. How many of them are based in the U.S.? I have no idea. But 90 million people are following one person on social media. I don't know how active she is on social media or on Twitter. I know there are some people that do that. But you know, one of the trends that I really saw this year, more than anything, is I'm a big sports guy. So recently there was the NBA draft followed by free agency started. So I was just kind of interested in hearing. But I couldn't get any information. I was like, you know, I look at ESPN, I look at SportsCenter and Sports Illustrated. I look at these traditional sites, and I'm not getting any information about, like, rumors about so-and-so meeting with somebody. I was like, oh, okay, you know what? Let me go find one of these guys and see if there's any activity on Twitter. So I switch over to Twitter, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tweets and information about this free agent, this player, and this. I was like, when did this change? Before, ESPN alerts would come up. Now, everything's tweeted out. There's a major shift going on. And in the midst of that, you see people are following that sportscaster, the athlete, even high school students who have Twitter accounts. They have people following them. So that's kind of the culture that we're living in. And it's just amazing to me that so many people are following. So whether we like it or not, whether we admit it or not, we all follow something or someone. We follow friends, we follow pop culture, we follow celebrities, we follow family, our own selfish desires, or we follow God. We are all following something. So the question that we have to ask this morning is this: what does following Jesus look like? He says, if you want to be my disciple, give up your own way or deny yourself, take up the cross, and he says, follow me. Why does Jesus add that last part in there? Follow me. This morning, we examined that idea of following Jesus and what that means. My first point this morning is this: to follow Jesus means no questions asked. It's an ability to immediately respond with a yes, no questions asked. And for that, I want to take us to Genesis chapter 22. Abraham is, if you're familiar with the story of Abraham, he was old, no kids with him and his wife, no kids. But he was promised by God in Genesis chapter 12, you will have a descendant. Your descendants will be many, basically. Then you will have many descendants. He's advancing in age. He's past 90, maybe 100 years old before he has finally son Isaac. And so when we come to chapter 22, sometime later, so sometime after Isaac was born, God tested Abraham's faith. Abraham, God called. Yes, he replied, here I am. Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will show you." The next morning, Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey and took 2 of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire for a burnt offering and set out for the place God had told him about. There are a couple of things in this passage when we read Genesis chapter 22. There's a couple of things in here that just kind of pops out at me. First thing that really pops out is God tested Abraham. God tested Abraham. I don't know what your thoughts are about that. I don't know what your thoughts about God testing our faith. But whether it happens today or not, here is one example. In our Bible, God tested Abraham's faith. God said, "I know how much you love Isaac. I know how precious he is to you. I want to know if you love me more than Isaac." That's why God tested his faith. You know, we have a tendency to love something that is so precious or that we hold so dear in our lives, that it might become an idol. That we love it so much, that we treasure it so much, that at some point that our love and devotion for that gets greater than our love and devotion to God. Did Abraham struggle with this? God wanted to find out. So that's why he tested him. Second part that really stands out is the test itself is the way you and I look at it, it's inhumane. Sacrifice your son. What is this? You know, what kind of test is this? It seems like a cruel test, but once again, the object of the test was to see if Abraham loved God more than Isaac. So not only do we see God test him, but he tests him with something that just seems so shocking. Sacrifice your son to me as a burnt offering. Third, which is kind of where I want to spend a little more time, is third thing that really stands out to me when I look at this passage is Abraham's response. He responded with a yes, and it was immediate. Early the next morning, Abraham heard from God, and he left as soon as he could. Early next morning. He got up early the next morning. It was a shocking request, but you know, after everything that Abraham has been through, to finally have Isaac, to hold his son. Here was God saying, give him back in the most unusual way, as a sacrifice, a burnt offering. What we see here is that Abraham did not think about it for a week, a day, a week, 2 weeks, a month. He didn't think about it the very next day. He got up early and he headed out to do what God had asked him to do. And the most amazing thing about this is we know from verse 1 it was a test. Abraham has no clue that this is a test. He really feels like this is what God is asking him to do. It doesn't make sense to me, but, well, God is asking, and I'm going to obey, and I'm going to follow. To follow Jesus requires an ability to immediately respond with a yes. No questions asked. Abraham loved God so much that he didn't hesitate. The sacrifice was great, shocking, but to Abraham, it was worth it. What does it mean to follow Jesus? It means submission to God's will. You know, when it comes to navigation or when it comes to directions, it's hard for me to give up control because I think I'm pretty good. Might be a pride thing, might be a guy thing, I don't know. But I feel like I'm really good with directions. Even in a new city, I can go and I kind of can gauge where I am, find my way back around. One time on a short-term mission trip, we had an off day, and I asked one of the guys. He was the oldest member of the team. I said, "Hey," his name was John too, John Pack. I said, "Hey, John, why don't you lead us today? We want to go to Chinatown." We were in San Francisco. I said, "We want to go to Chinatown. We want to eat dim sum, and then we want to go to Golden Gate Bridge. Okay, that's our goal. And then we want to come back to where we were staying." So we got up, we had breakfast, and we set out. Pulls out his phone, he's looking at the map. A couple other people are on their phones, and we start heading out. And as we walk, one of the guys, I asked him, he's from Taiwan, so I said, "You find the restaurant." So he's looking at, he found the restaurant, and we headed out. We walked, it's a city. We flew into San Francisco, so we didn't have a car. So we either had to walk or use the bus or other means of public transportation. So we're walking. And in my mind, they told me where we want to go. So I kind of look at the map. I kind of see where we are going, where we need to go, and where we are walking. I was like, "Oh man, this seems like it's a longer way." I didn't say anything. Just followed. Finally, we made it to the restaurant. We waited. We ended up going to, I think it was called the East West Restaurant. It's in Chinatown. It was made popular because President Obama came there and his picture's outside. And so, I don't know. But it actually is a really good dim sum, one of the best that we had. So after we eat, it was good for us to have a Chinese guy. He was ordering all the food for us. So we were stuffed. We were ready to go. And from there, I said, "All right, John, which way?" He's like, "Well, I think if we go over here and take this bus, we can get over there." And then I said, "Okay, sounds good." We go over there. Long story short, the bus never showed up because that day was a holiday. And we didn't know. So we're waiting for about 20, 30 minutes. There's no action. Not a bus. We see a bus coming and it turns. We see another one coming and it turns. Like 2 or 3 blocks. I was like, just silence. After a while, we started venturing out. And then we took a bus here and there, wandered around. From the restaurant, if the bus had come, we would have been at, I think, Golden Gate within 30 minutes. 4 hours later, we finally get to Golden Gate. It was tough. And throughout the whole time, I was thinking, "Oh, we're going the wrong direction," because I asked the guy who's never been to San Francisco to navigate, And I was like, "Oh." It was hard for me to really give up control in that situation. But I did not intervene because I had asked him. It's really hard to sit back. This happens with God too. We say, "God, I will follow you." And we start going. But we stop at some point and say, "God, I follow you, but only up to this point. I can't go beyond this point, what you're asking me to do. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't like it." Or we say, "Lord Jesus, we want to follow you." But as we go, we think, "Jesus, are you sure you know the way?" No. Here, let me show you. And we kind of take over, which was what I was tempted to do on that trip. Or we think, "Hey, Jesus, that seems like a long way. I know a shortcut that'll save us some time. Let's go this way." To follow Jesus means submission to God's will, to give up control. What does it mean to give up control? It means willfully surrender your right. If you give up your control, you're saying that you will quietly follow. When you give up control, you're saying, "Okay, you know what? This doesn't make sense, but I will follow you." You cannot surrender your right, and when things don't go the way that you hope, to wrestle that back. See, to be a follower of Jesus, if we are committed to be a follower of Jesus, to be a disciple, you go all in. I think that in Matthew 16, verse 24, Jesus had to put that part, follow me. I think he needed to put this part in there to distinguish or to remind his disciples. You can take up the cross, but follow me actually is the point of taking that step, I think. And another step, and another step. And to go where he is leading. What does it mean to follow Jesus? To follow Jesus requires stepping out of our comfort zone. And this is probably one of the more difficult ones. I've shared this before, and I know maybe some of you guys don't believe me, but public speaking is not my thing. I really don't like it. Here is much smaller, it's intimate. I'm more familiar. I don't get as nervous Sunday mornings as I used to. But public speaking is a challenge for me. And it's weird because I'm in ministry and I do a lot of that. It may appear that on the outside that I am okay, but on the inside often, I'm not. I'm nervous. Sometimes I don't know what to do with my hands. It gets sweaty. Yesterday, Brendan and Hannah got married right here, and I was holding my Bible yesterday, and I had to just keep on wiping my hand. I got so nervous and so sweaty. My Bible is it's still damp from all of the sweat, And I was just, constantly wiping, trying to dry my hands. What I should have done was also dry my Bible, but that looks weird. We're in the middle of the wedding, right? Even in something simple, and even a small intimate gathering like yesterday, I was nervous. My hands, even now, I'm thinking about yesterday, it's getting wet. So that's me. That's what I have to deal with. I remember early in my ministry, I graduated from college in 1994, and I felt the calling for seminary. I started seminary in January of 95. So I think this was either in 1995, summer of 95 or summer of 96. We had an event in the city. We rented it was around this time, I think, around July. We rented the Sunset High School auditorium. And what we did there was we needed a venue that would hold a lot of people, because we did a big youth, like a conference. And the guest speaker that was there, he spoke both Korean and English very fluently. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was have a time for the parents to come out on the very last evening. And, so that students as well as the parents, he could address both of them. So we felt like it was a really good opportunity to do that. And they asked me to lead worship for this conference. So, after a little hesitation, I said, okay, I agreed. I was used to leading worship for about 30 or 40 people. The first couple nights, a couple hundred students, it was tough, but it was okay. The third night, oh my. I don't know what the capacity of Sunset High School's auditorium is, but I think there was about 400 or 500 people there. I remember before I got on the stage to lead worship, I guess I was just doing this, just going back and forth. Like this, just kind of like this, nervous. One of my students, keyboardist, she's like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "No. I feel like I'm gonna throw up. I feel like there's butterflies in my stomach. My throat's all itchy and scratchy, and I don't know what to do." She's like, "Here, have some water." Somebody else comes and he's, "Here, take this. That'll help you with your throat." And people are like, let's just pray for him. It was so nerve-wracking. I got on the stage and I look out and I just see a bunch of people. I was like, "Oh Lord, why are you putting me in this position? I didn't study music. I'm not this. I'm not that. I definitely, that environment, that moment, early in my ministry, that was definitely outside of my comfort zone. And unfortunately, that's not the last time that I found myself in that kind of a situation outside of my comfort zone. That's not the last time I had to do something uncomfortable as well. Just thinking about it makes me nervous. You know, I've had many times, I've had to do many things in ministry. I've had to do many things where it was uncomfortable for me. I think the first time after I got hired at Sarang Community Church in Anaheim, the first time I had to kind of preside, I got up there, maybe 1,000 people. And I was just like, oh, I was so nervous. I remember sitting in the back asking the pastor, I said, you got to pray for me. I am so nervous right now to get up there and see these people. So, you know, after a little bit of time, it got a little bit better. But I've experienced many things outside of my comfort zone because God has really taken me out of my comfort zone. If we want to be a follower of Jesus, we have to get used to being uncomfortable. We cannot stay in our comfort zone only doing what we are comfortable with. Because Jesus will definitely take you. If you say, Lord, I want to be your disciple, I want to follow you, He's going to say, great, let's go over here. And as you're going, you're going to be, I'm not comfortable with that. Jesus, that's beyond my comfort area. And He's going to turn back and say, but you said you will follow me. Let's go. When we follow Jesus, we have to be willing to get out of our comfort zone. We don't restrict God and tell Him we will only go so far, that we will only follow as long as we don't do any public speaking, for example. Can you imagine if I said, God, yes, I will go to seminary, I'll become a pastor, but no public speaking, because I can't do that. What kind of request would that be? What kind of pastor would I be? I wouldn't be one. Jesus doesn't ask us to do things that are within our boundary. He doesn't ask us to do things that will only be limited to what we are comfortable with, our comfort zone. When we are outside of a comfort zone, it is then that we are stretched, isn't it? Think about this. Whether it's in academics, whether it's at work, sometimes you're asked to do something that is beyond your scope of ability at that moment. And it is at that moment when you reluctantly say yes, and you experience it and you work through that, what happens? You grow. In your knowledge, in your experience, confidence. It is when we are taken outside of our comfort zone, when we are stretched, that is where we grow. That is where we learn to trust God. So you see, He has to take you out. He will not leave you in your comfort zone. You will not grow. Only when you're taken out of that comfort zone will you grow. Only after countless and countless exposure to me, to get out in front of people, would have I finally started. It doesn't mean that I still don't get nervous in certain situations. I think I was nervous yesterday because I think that was about my 10th wedding that I've done over the years. So it's something I've done before, but it's something I still am not used to. And each wedding is so different. we will still get nervous. God will take you and He will stretch you. Doesn't mean that you don't get nervous. If we don't get out of our comfort zone, if we only stay in our comfort zone, we will not grow. It is when God takes you, when you say, God, I will follow you, and He leads you out of that comfort zone. It is in that moment when we are stretched. It is in that moment when we grow. In the moment that we learn to trust God even more. Following Jesus means that our boundary is constantly stretched and tested. Ultimately, we say no to self, yes to God. When we are stretched outside of a boundary, we need to respond with a yes. We don't follow Jesus to a certain place, a certain distance for a certain period of time. We follow Him every day. We follow Him even if that means we step out of our comfort zone. We follow Jesus wherever He calls us because we want to be His disciples. That's what verse 24 is talking about. If you want to be my disciple, give up your own way, deny yourself, take up this cross, and then follow me. David Platt is a pastor, and he's authored a book called Radical. And in his book, he asks some very tough questions. He says this. This brings us to the crucial question for every professing or potential follower of Jesus. Do we really believe Jesus is worth abandoning everything for? Do you and I really believe that Jesus is so good, so satisfying, and so rewarding that we will leave all we have and all we own and all we are in order to find our fullness in Him? Do you and I believe Him enough to obey Him and to follow Him wherever He leads? Do we believe He is worth abandoning everything for? We can express our desire to follow Jesus, but do our actions back up that claim? When you look at this verse, when you look at the concept of discipleship, when you look at that from a more of a macro level, it really comes down to the question, is Jesus worth it? Is it worth following Jesus if it means, you can fill in the blank. Is it really worth following Jesus if I have to give up my rights? Is it really worth following Jesus if I have to make sacrifices? Sacrifice my goals, career, my future, my life? Is it worth it? That's the question David Platt asks. And ultimately, I believe that's the question Jesus is asking. Am I worth it? Will you follow me? I don't want you to follow me if you're not willing to go all the way. My prayer is that Jesus becomes so desirous to you that you will literally abandon everything to follow Him. To truly follow Christ means that He has become everything to us. That He has become everything to us. May Jesus be your all. May He become everything to you. That following Him is no cost at all, but it is a joy. That is an honor. And it's something that you desire to do. And it becomes so easy. Because He is worth abandoning everything for.